He was a soldier, haunted by the fire that took his face. He hid from the world in a concrete bunker beneath the city. His only partner was Ash, a retired Arson K9, a dog trained to smell the anatomy of a fire. One Tuesday, Ash became obsessed, not with a person, not with a sound, but with a cold metal ventilation grate in the corner of the room. He began to whine, a low sound of profound distress. Then, he began to dig. His claws screeched on the metal, frantic, hysterical, trying to tear the grate from the wall. Marcus tried to pull him away, but the dog refused to stop. He wasn't smelling smoke. There was no heat. Ash was smelling something far more terrifying. He wasn't smelling the fire. He was smelling the recipe. What unseen trap, already set in the bones of the building, could this animal smell? And could the broken soldier trust his partner before the timer ran out? Please consider supporting us by subscribing to the channel. Marcus's apartment wasn't a home. It was a bunker. It was a space designed not for living, but for surviving. The walls were bare concrete. The single window was high and small, caked in the grime of a city that never looked down. His furniture was Spartan, a military cot, a metal folding chair, a workbench covered in the guts of old radios. He was a man who used to build bridges under fire. Now he just took things apart, trying to find a signal in the static. Life was a ritual of isolation. He would check the 3 heavy-duty locks on his door. Once, twice, a third time, his hand brushing the cold steel. He would sit in the silence, listening to the muffled sounds of the building above him. A footstep, a dropped object, the faint cry of a baby, each one a potential threat, a reason to flinch. He was a ghost in his own life. A man defined by the empty space he occupied and the shadows he refused to leave. The neighbors were just sounds, the heavy tread of the man in 2B, the faint, tinny music from 3A. They were a community he refused to join, a world he could not and would not re-enter. His only anchor was Ash. Ash was a large, gray-muzzled German shepherd, retired after a warehouse collapse crushed his right hip. He walked with a slight limp, worse on cold days. The K9 unit called him unfit. Marcus called him family. He was a specialist. His nose wasn't trained for bombs, but for the chemical ghosts of arson, accelerants in parts per billion. A multi-million-dollar sensor wrapped in fur. For Marcus, he was simply the only living creature who didn't flinch at his scars. The neighbors were just sounds, except one. Mrs. Chen in 3B, who left soup outside his door every Tuesday. She never knocked, never asked, just left it there. Last week he'd finally left a note. Thank you. This week she'd left 2 containers. He was a man isolated by the pity of others and the terror within himself. But the world was a minefield of memories. His trauma made every shadow a threat, every scent an ambush. A few days prior, a new smell had filtered through his vent. Smoke. Faint. Acrid. Smoke. His heart had exploded in his chest. His breath hitched. He wasn't in the basement. He was back in the Humvee. The smell of burning diesel, of superheated rubber, of flesh. He was choking. He was burning. He'd scrambled to his feet, overturning his chair, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't work the locks on his own door. He'd checked his own outlets, one by one, ripping plugs from the wall, his scarred hands tracing the cold wires, feeling for heat. He was drowning in the memory, suffocating on the floor of his own mind, until Ash had started barking, a sharp, grounding, present-tense sound that cut through the terror. Marcus had collapsed against the wall, his forehead slick with sweat, gasping for air that wasn't on fire. He was a combat engineer who'd wired bridges under mortar fire, undone by breakfast. His calibration was broken. How could he trust his own judgment? So now, when Ash stood at that same vent, whining, Marcus's first instinct was to deny, to retreat. "No, boy," he said, his voice rough. "It's nothing. It's just the building. It's just toast." But this was different. Ash wasn't panicked. He wasn't barking in alarm or distress. He was focused. His body was rigid, his tail low. This wasn't fear. This was work. The dog left the vent and walked to the door, scratching it. He looked back at Marcus, his intelligent amber eyes burning with an urgency that transcended language. He was saying, "This is real. This is not in your head. Come, see." Marcus, his heart hammering for a different reason now, put on his boots. He opened the 3 locks. "Okay, boy," he whispered, grabbing a flashlight. "Show me." Ash's persistence was no longer a question. It was a mission. The dog led Marcus out of the apartment, not frantically, but with the quiet deliberation of a professional heading to a job site. He led him first to the wall vent in the main hallway, the one that connected to Marcus's own. Ash sat. He performed a perfect trained alert, his body rigid, his gaze fixed on the grate. The ghost of the engineer he used to be woke up. Marcus looked around. The hallway was empty. He took a screwdriver from his pocket and pried the metal grate off the wall. He put his face to the opening. Dust, yes. Mildew, yes. But beneath it, something else. Not toast. It was the oily, chemical tang of paint thinner. A lot of it poured deep into the ventilation shaft, soaking the dust and debris within. It was an accelerant, a highway for fire, laid right at the building's lungs. His blood ran cold. Ash immediately trotted 10 feet down the hall to a gray metal junction box. It looked new. The paint was too bright, the screws too clean compared to the grime of the rest of the basement. Marcus's trained eye caught it instantly. Why new? Why here? He opened the cover. The wiring inside was a disaster. But it wasn't just a mess. It was a deliberate mess. This wasn't neglect. This was a design. The insulation on 2 heavy-gauge wires was stripped bare. The gleaming copper ends were twisted, bent to face each other, a tiny gap left between them. It was a crude, effective spark gap, wired right into the building's main electrical timer system. A spark, waiting for a signal. Marcus pulled his phone, took photos. Then he saw it. A small mechanical timer, the kind used for automatic lights, bolted beside the spark gap. Its plastic dial was set to 2:15 a.m. He reached for it, then stopped. The timer was encased in a small metal box, secured with a tamper-evident lock. If he forced it, would it trigger early? His engineer's mind screamed at him, "This is a bomb, defuse it." But his shaking hands told a different truth. He didn't trust himself anymore. Not after the burnt toast. Not after 3 years of seeing threats in shadows. He took another photo and backed away. Ash was already moving. He padded silently, like a gray wolf, to the far end of the basement, to the utility room where the main gas manifold entered the building. The air here was heavy, musty. The dog alerted again, sitting hard, his nose pointed at a specific pipe joint. Marcus's flashlight beam found it. The joint was wet, not with rust or condensation. It was wet with fresh pipe dope, and as he leaned in, his scarred skin prickling, he could hear it. The faint shh, a new leak, a purposeful leak. Marcus stumbled back to his bunker, his mind racing, the engineer's logic clicking and whirring like a machine coming back online. He sat on his cot, the flashlight beam playing on the concrete. The pieces didn't just fit, they interlocked with horrifying precision. An accelerant, saturating the vents to spread the fire instantly. A spark, set for 2:15 a.m., and fuel, gallons of it, invisible, pumping into the enclosed space. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a repair job gone wrong. This was a blueprint. This was a bomb. He ran. He didn't even stop to lock his doors. He took the stairs 2 at a time, bursting into the ground floor lobby. He found the building superintendent, Mr. Henderson, in his small office. On the desk, a bottle of cheap whiskey, a stack of certified letters from the bank, and a single plane ticket to Mexico City, dated for tomorrow morning. Marcus tried to explain. The timer, the accelerant, the gas leak. Henderson looked at Marcus's scarred face, at the phone with its blurry photos, and laughed. A wet, hollow sound. You think I don't know this building's falling apart? 20 years I've held it together with duct tape and prayer. But the city, the bank, they don't care. He tapped the foreclosure notice. Gone in 30 days anyway. So fix it. Call the fire department. With what money? Henderson's voice cracked. You want me to admit I let it get this bad? I lose my license, my pension, everything. Look, soldier, there's nothing wrong that won't be the bank's problem in a month. Marcus stared at the plane ticket. Henderson was running. But from debt or from something worse? Marcus called 911. The 2 officers who arrived were polite. They were respectful, but their eyes were wary. They saw the basement apartment. They saw the 3 locks on the door. They saw the intense, scarred man and his dog. Marcus laid out his evidence, his engineer's logic precise and clear. The accelerant, the timer, the gas. The younger officer walked to the junction box, pried it open. He looked inside, frowned. Sarge, these wires look old, the older cop interrupted. Sir, we appreciate the call. We'll file a report for the building inspector. They'll send someone Monday. Monday is 4 days. That's the process. The officer's voice was kind, but firm. I've taken 3 arson conspiracy calls this month. 2 were faulty appliances. 1 was a teenager's vape. We can't evacuate a building because of a hunch. Marcus tried to show them the photos on his phone. Blurry, dark, meaningless to untrained eyes. They saw a paranoid veteran and his dog. They left. The man everyone thought was a ghost was the only one who saw the trap. Part 4-5, the last option. 11:47 p.m. Marcus couldn't sleep. He made a decision. He would stop it himself. He took his tools to the junction box. His plan was simple. Cut the power, no spark, no fire. But when he opened the backup panel, his blood froze. A second device. A battery backup system. If main power failed, this would trigger immediately. A failsafe against sabotage. Henderson had thought of everything. If Marcus cut the power now, the building would burn in seconds. If he did nothing, it would burn at 2:15 a.m. He was trapped. The only way to stop the fire was to survive it. He went back to his apartment, set his alarm for 2:10 a.m., and waited with Ash in the dark, a wet towel and a pry bar beside the door. 5 hours until the timer ran out. It happened at 2:15 a.m. The alarm screamed, but it was too late. Marcus opened his door to a wall of oily black smoke. The accelerant. The heat was immediate, a physical blow that staggered him, and he froze. For 3 seconds, he wasn't in the building. He was in the Humvee, burning. Then, pain. Sharp. Real. Ash's teeth on his wrist. The dog bit him hard, yanking him back from the abyss. Ash barked, not fear, but command. The pattern interrupt his VA therapist had taught him. Find something real. The flashback shattered. The soldier surfaced. He grabbed a wet towel, wrapped it around Ash's muzzle, grabbed his pry bar. Let's go to work, boy. They moved. They were a single entity, a scarred man and his dog. Ash stayed low, a gray shadow cutting through the smoke, his nose leading where Marcus's eyes failed. He didn't run from the fire. He ran into it. He slammed on doors, floor by floor, a ghost emerging from the smoke. Fire! Fire! This way! Not the stairs! He was a commander again. Panic. Screams. But through the chaos, he and his dog were an island of purpose, herding the terrified, half-asleep residents. He led them to the third-floor landing, a dead end. The fire was roaring up behind them. Ash tried to bound down the stairs ahead, but his injured hip gave out on the third step. He yelped, a sound Marcus had never heard, and collapsed. Marcus didn't hesitate. He lifted the 90-pound dog onto his shoulders in a fireman's carry. His back screamed, his lungs burned, but Ash had carried him out of the dark for 3 years. Now it was his turn. Together, boy. We go together. He carried Ash, using the pry bar to smash the drywall to the adjacent building. He created a hole, an escape. He shoved the residents through one by one. He was the last one out. But as he pushed Ash through the hole into the next building, he heard it. A voice. Crying from apartment 3B, Mrs. Chen, the soup lady, the first person in 3 years to treat him like he was human. Ash, stay. He pointed through the hole. The dog whined but obeyed. Marcus turned back into the smoke. He found Mrs. Chen collapsed in her doorway, overcome by fumes. He lifted her, she weighed nothing, and ran. He made it to the hole just as the ceiling behind him collapsed in a shower of sparks. He pushed Mrs. Chen through to waiting hands, then climbed through himself, his lungs screaming. They stumbled onto the fire escape of the adjacent building. Below, Henderson stood in the alley, watching the flames consume his building. When he saw Marcus emerge with survivors, his insurance fraud dying with every saved life, something in him snapped. He grabbed a fallen metal pipe and charged up the fire escape stairs. A gray shadow shot past Marcus. Ash intercepted Henderson at full speed, slamming him into the metal railing. The dog didn't bite. He pinned, a low growl rumbling in his chest, until firefighters swarmed up the stairs. The sun rose over the city. The building was a smoking shell. Marcus sat on a fire truck's steps, Ash's head in his lap. His hands still shook. The EMT said it was adrenaline. Marcus knew better. It was the beginning of another flashback. But this time, he didn't run from it. Mrs. Chen appeared, wrapped in a Red Cross blanket. She walked over, looked at Marcus, then at Ash. Her English was broken, but her meaning was clear. "Good boy," she said, touching Ash's head. Then she touched Marcus's shoulder. "You too. Good boy." It was the simplest thing, but it was enough. Henderson was arrested at the scene. The arson investigation found the timer, the accelerant, the gas line. The evidence was overwhelming. Later, Marcus learned the truth. Henderson had been paid $50,000 by a development company to solve the building problem. The man had chosen money over 17 lives, but the story didn't end clean. Marcus couldn't go back to basement apartments, not because it was destroyed, but because he'd been living in a tomb. The fire department offered him a consulting position, arson investigations. "You and your dog," the captain said. "We need that nose. And that brain. He hadn't accepted yet, but he hadn't said no. He found a new apartment, ground floor, 2 exits, large windows. Ash had a bed by the door, and Marcus left the bedroom door open at night. He still checked the locks. 3 times. Old habits died hard. But now sometimes he opened them and stepped outside. His watch had just begun.